In the last few years, Christian nationalism has moved from fringe rhetoric to legislative agenda. State lawmakers are mandating that the Ten Commandments be placed in classrooms. Abortion bans are framed as divine will. A Republican candidate for governor in Tennessee wants women who have had abortions to be executed. Politicians openly declare the United States as a Christian nation under God's authority. The argument is simple. God is the father. The nation must submit. Families must submit. Women must submit. And we are told that this is tradition. Patriarchy is natural. Male authority is inevitable. It is all part of God's grand design. We're told that male dominance is not a political arrangement. It is a biological fact. But what if God wasn't always a father? What if the he in the sky is not ancient and inevitable, but a relatively recent political invention designed to solve a very specific economic problem? Today, we are looking at one of the most successful rebranding campaigns in human history, the moment we killed the goddess to invent the patriarch. Before we get started, you know what to do. Love or hate, like and share, because the algorithm does not care. Now, I am not a biblical scholar, but I have read the Bible several times, and I know both it and history better than most Christians that I've met. Most Christians actually don't read the Bible. They have no idea what's in that book. You don't believe me? Talk to a few. But I think by now you all trust me enough to let me kind of walk you through this. So I'm going to very clearly and as succinctly as I can walk you through the historical arc of this transition. To understand what changed, we have to go back before monotheism, back before our father, to the ancient Near East, Canaan, Mesopotamia, Egypt, a very spiritually crowded region. Divinity was plural. It was complicated, embodied in both male and female forms. Take Inanna, for example, also known as Ishtar. Inanna was the goddess of war, political power, kingship, sexuality. Kings in Sumer ritually married her in order to legitimize their rule. Power did not flow from a solitary father in the sky. It flowed from a goddess whose favor made you a king. Now look at Asherah in Canaanite religion. Archaeological evidence suggests that she was worshipped widely, not hidden, not fringe. Bitch was everywhere. The divine was not exclusively male. It was relational, layered, sometimes contradictory. Most of you are familiar with the Greek and Roman pantheons, so you know how complicated that was. It was like the Real Housewives of Mount Olympus. In many early societies, lineage was often traced through the mother because maternity is observable. Paternity is not. You don't need theology to know who gave birth, but you need control in order to claim fatherhood. And then the monotheistic coup happened. We arrive in ancient Israel. Early Israelite religion did not begin as strict monotheism. It emerged from a Canaanite context. The high god El was the head of the pantheon. Yahweh, who most refer to as the God of the Bible, appears historically as kind of a regional warrior god who later absorbs the attributes of El. This wasn't a clean philosophical upgrade. It was a consolidation. A rabbi told me that Jews don't believe there is only one God. They acknowledge the existence of other gods. They just worship the one. They're like, we know there are all these other gods out here, but this is our guy. The Hebrew Bible preserves the tension. Take 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 6. He brought out the image of Asherah from the house of the Lord outside Jerusalem to the Wadi Kidron, burned it at the Wadi Kidron, beat it to dust, and threw the dust of it upon the graves of the common people. Yeah. Or Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 21. You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole beside the altar that you make for the Lord your God. We have repeated commands to destroy Asherah poles. So why the obsession? Because people kept putting them up. You don't outlaw something that nobody cares about, that nobody believes in. You outlaw something that people are really attached to. They liked them Asherah poles, kept putting them up. This was not a pagan invasion corrupting a pure monotheism. It was internal reform, a class of priests centralizing worship. Archaeological inscriptions from the late 9th and early 8th century BCE in Kuntilat Ajrud, or Horvat Teman, apologies if I'm butchering this pronunciation. This was in the northeastern Sinai Peninsula. These inscriptions reference, quote, Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. The text we inherited, the Bible, is the edited version of the story, the victorious theology. Yahweh becomes singular, supreme. The divine feminine disappears from the official record. Monotheism does something that polytheism does not. It centralizes power. One God, one law, one covenant.
One ring to rule them all.
It's administratively efficient. Why manage a whole pantheon when you can install a single sovereign? Why negotiate with divine plurality when you can declare eternal hierarchy? The structure mirrors a state. Theology becomes governance. Now we move from theology over to economics. Agriculture changed everything. Land can be owned, transferred. Property introduces inheritance, and inheritance introduces anxiety. If you are a man with land, livestock, or political authority, you want your biological son to inherit it all. But in a world before DNA testing, you got a problem. How do you know that's your son? You can't verify paternity scientifically in those days. So instead, you regulate women socially and legally. You control female sexuality. You enforce virginity, criminalize adultery, restrict women's mobility. Adultery in the Hebrew Bible is not a romantic betrayal. It's a property crime. It introduces uncertainty into lineage. In Genesis, God promises Abraham land and descendants, but his wife Sarah can't conceive. This promise that God gave him required a womb, and time was running out. So Sarah does something drastic, horrifying to us, but not necessarily to someone in the ancient world. She gives her Egyptian slave, Hagar, to Abraham as a surrogate. Yeah, go have sex with the slave and get a son, right? So Hagar becomes pregnant. Immediately, the hierarchy destabilizes. The enslaved woman now carries the heir. Sarah feels displaced. I want to say, you sent her to your husband's room. What the Anyway, Sarah demands that Hagar be expelled. Abraham complies. Hagar flees into the wilderness. Long story short, God appears to her directly, gets her somehow back out of the wilderness. She returns, she gives birth to Ishmael, and the tension simmers for years. Now, eventually, Sarah conceives Isaac, but now we have another problem. We got two sons, two potential heirs. Two bloodlines competing under one covenant. Sarah insists that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out permanently. Abraham resists, but God eventually sides with Sarah's demands to secure Isaac as the heir. Hagar and her son are sent into the desert with minimal provisions. They almost die before God intervenes once again and promises Ishmael his own lineage.
God said to Abraham, "Look toward the heaven and number the stars, and so shall your descendants be." But Abraham's wife, Sarah, wasn't getting any younger. And God wasn't coming through on his promise. And she was getting nervous because she didn't have any children. So she sent Abraham to the bed of her maid, Hagar. And Abraham and Hagar had Ishmael. And not long after they did, God kept his promise to Sarah, as he'd always intended to. And Abraham and Sarah had Isaac. And Sarah said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman will not be heir with my son Isaac." And so it began. The Jews, the sons of Isaac; the Arabs, the sons of Ishmael.
This story is framed as some kind of innocuous divine drama, but it's a story about inheritance, about which son counts, about which woman's womb secures property, promise, and legacy. Sarah and Hagar are the reproductive infrastructure of a covenant that was built on land and lineage. Their bodies carry that promise. The covenant is spiritual, yes, but it's also material. Land, lineage, legitimacy, these are material things. When God is reimagined solely as father, the metaphor sanctifies male inheritance. Divine fatherhood mirrors human fatherhood. The invisible sky daddy guarantees the bloodline. And if God is the ultimate father, then male authority inside the household becomes sacred. We're just cosplaying the same dynamic that the big sky daddy god has with the rest of us. Daddy's in charge. If we're going to talk honestly about paternity anxiety and control, we have to look at the religious texts that codified it, because the theology did not stay abstract. It became law. The passages in the Bible that talk about women became law. They became moral instruction. And I can't speak to Islam because I'm not from that part of the world. But if you are Jewish or Christian and you grew up in the West, every law that restricts women's autonomy has its roots in that book. Deuteronomy chapter 2. A bride who cannot provide proof of virginity can be stoned to death at her father's doorstep because she has played the whore in her father's house. Translation, she has jeopardized male property inheritance and lineage before the transfer of ownership was complete. Virginity has nothing to do with romance. It's Quality control. Numbers chapter 5. There is a ritual for a suspected adulteress. If a husband is jealous, yes, based solely on his fifis, he can bring his wife to a priest. She drinks a bitter water that's meant to induce a curse. If her body reacts, she is guilty. There is no equivalent ritual for any man, for a husband. No. Absolutely not. Suspicion alone is enough to trigger state-sanctioned humiliation and possible death. The issue, again, is not emotional betrayal, it's paternity certainty. Judges 19 is even harder to read. From verses 22 through 26. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a perverse lot, surrounded the house and started pounding on the door. They said to the old man, the master of the house, "Bring out the man who came into your house so that we may have intercourse with him." And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said, No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man is my guest, do not do this vile thing. Here's my virgin daughter and his concubine. Ravish them and do whatever you want with them. So the man seizes the concubine and puts her out to them. These men rape and abuse her all through the night until the morning. And as dawn breaks, they let her go. And she falls down at the doorstep of the man's house where her master was until, the sun comes up. And in verse 29, quote, "He took a knife and grasping his concubine, he cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel." Okay, to review, Judges chapters 19 through 21, the Levite's concubine is assaulted to death in the town of Gibeah, which belongs to the tribe of Benjamin. And after she dies, the Levite cuts her body into 12 pieces and sends them throughout the territory of Israel as an act of political theater. Each piece goes to one of the 12 tribes. The message being, hey, look what happened with the tribe of Benjamin. Look at the moral collapse going on over here. So the tribes gather and demand that Benjamin hand over the men of Gibeah who committed that crime. Benjamin refuses. So the conflict escalates into a full-scale civil war between the tribes, and the result is catastrophic. Tens of thousands of people die. The tribe of Benjamin is nearly wiped out. In fact, the Israelites later panic because they realize that one of the 12 tribes is on the brink of extinction. So they scramble to procure wives for the surviving Benjaminite men. Additional violence. So the concubine's dismembered body becomes the pretext for a bloody civil war, the near destruction of a tribe, and the abduction of countless women in order to preserve male lineage. The stated cause is outrage over this incident of sexual violence, but structurally the story is really about tribal honor, internal cohesion, and the preservation of Israel's patriarchal order. The concubine's body is used as evidence of the social disorder. Her death is transformed into a call to action for male solidarity in war. She's not treated as a victim, a person whose life had intrinsic value. Oh, no. She's a signal flare. And then there is Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 24 in the New Testament. "Wives, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is head of the church, his body, and is himself its savior. Just as the church is subject to Christ, so also wives ought to be in everything to their husbands."
Just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
The household code mirrors the hierarchy of heaven. Christ over man, man over woman. Submission is framed as a sacred duty. Now let's deal with the verse that people reach for the second you critique Ephesians 5:22. They flip a few lines down to Ephesians 5:25. "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Aw, doesn't that sound sweet? And the argument goes something like this. See? It's mutual. It's sacrificial. Christianity doesn't hate women. It elevated women. No, bitch. It didn't elevate women. It redefined the hierarchy. It didn't remove it. Ephesians 5:25 does not dismantle submission. It reframes domination as benevolence. Verse 22 establishes the structure. Wives submit to their husbands as unto the Lord. The husband is positioned as the head. Authority flows downward. Verse 25 does not say that husbands must submit. It doesn't say that husbands must obey. It doesn't say that husbands must share authority. It says husbands must love. And the model for that love is Christ and the church. But Christ is not equal to the church. Christ is above the church. Christ governs the church. He leads it, controls it, sanctifies it, corrects it, dies for it, sure, but he remains Lord over it. This isn't a metaphor for partnership. It's hierarchy masquerading as devotion. Then comes the line in verse 29 that people conveniently glide right past. Wait for it. "For no one ever hates his own flesh, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it. Why should you love your wife? Because she's your body. She is you. Not because she's an autonomous human being, not because she possesses independent sovereignty, but because she is conceptualized as an extension of you. Ownership through unity. She is folded into his identity, covered by his authority. The doctrine of coverture, the legal doctrine of coverture, is based on this. This became law, this concept. And when someone is treated as a part of you, you can claim to love them deeply while still denying them independent power. You protect what you control. You cherish what you govern. You sacrifice for what ultimately reinforces your own authority. Ephesians just improves the optics of patriarchy. It takes brute domination and reframes it as tender governance. It tells men that they're responsible for women, but responsibility is not the same thing as equality. Loving your subordinate does not make them your peer. It just makes you a gentle ruler, a benevolent patriarch. And benevolent patriarchy is still patriarchy, and it sucks. And that's why verse 25 doesn't cancel out verses 22 through 24. It completes them. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 12 through 14 goes even further. Quote, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to keep silent. They wouldn't like me. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. End quote. Silence is spiritual discipline. Authority is male by design. You're the one who f***ed up in the garden, so you can't be trusted forever and always. You're going to suffer through childbirth and you're going to shut the f*** up. If we want your opinion on something, we'll ask your husband. Taken together, these passages aren't random artifacts from the ancient world. They're policy documents embedded in scripture. They regulate sexuality, speech, inheritance, obedience. As I said, the legal doctrine of coverture is based on these principles. A woman's identity legally disappeared when she got married. They shall become one flesh, and that one flesh is the husband. She's invisible. She's a part of him now. The answer repeatedly, always, is control. And through the Bible, that control is declared divine. This theology does something politically brilliant. It offers ordinary men dignity within hierarchy. You must bow to the king. You must serve the empire. But in your house, you are the sovereign. You are the image of God. You are the father. And this structure scales. It moves from ancient Israel into Christianity. Christianity formalizes our father. Islam retains strong patriarchal lineage structures within its legal traditions as well. The father becomes legal head of the household across centuries of law codes that have been shaped by these Abrahamic frameworks. Fast forward to modern policy debates. The Heritage Foundation advocating for family values. What kind of family do you think they're talking about? The nuclear family, which has been elevated as the bedrock of civilization. Why? Because it promises every man a kingdom, provided he can secure a woman to stabilize it. The nuclear family is politically useful. It localizes male authority. It privatizes female labor. It stabilizes inheritance. What I'm basically saying here is that we're all still living under Abraham's tent. Our surnames, our family dynamics, our social customs surrounding marriage. They are artifacts of thousands of years worth of anxiety about paternity. The father's authority feels natural because it's been normalized for millennia. But think about who benefits from that current story that they're telling and who suffers. History tells us that the divine was once plural, gendered in multiple directions, negotiated rather than imposed. Not perfect, but not exclusively male. When male hierarchy is declared sacred, it feels permanent, unquestionable. But patriarchy is a system, a powerful one, yes, but it's not gravity. It's not a force of nature. It is legal and social architecture, and architecture can be redesigned. And if the abusive, power-hungry father was invented, he can also be destroyed, deconstructed. If this story was written, it can be unwritten. It was edited once, we can edit it again. It just takes patience, time, persistence, and enough women who are willing to decenter men and recenter themselves, their desires, and their authority over their own destiny. Thanks for watching. See you next time. If you enjoy this kind of content, I invite you to watch my series, Witches, Whores, and Rebels, a feminist history of patriarchal capitalism and how to burn it down. It's a 3-part series with a 90-page companion guide that gives you the history of how we got here, centering the witch hunts, women's resistance, and providing a framework for how we move forward from here. The link is in the description when you're ready.